A lot of the time when it comes to buying expensive collectibles, whether it's statues or anything of this caliber, you often ask yourself, is it worth the price of what it costs to get something like this? When you start getting into statues and the prices start exceeding $1,000, $1,500, and with this one right at or above $2,000, depending on your price for shipping, you wonder, is it worth the price overall? So I wanted to go over this statue, not necessarily do a review, but go over some of the things that I like and dislike about it and give my final thoughts on if it's worth the price of what it costs. And I'll also do another little update on the chip part on the base that I fixed. I'll get a close-up of that so you can see how that came out. I think it came out really well considering it was a small part to fix anyway, but it came out pretty good in my opinion. So I'll take the camera off the mount and I'll get a close-up of some of the things that I really like about the statue, and I'll go over a few of the things that I dislike about it too. I'd say the number one thing about this statue that I like the most is the fact that it has a tremendous amount of detail put into it. Everything from the base to the very top of the statue is extremely well detailed. You can see the individual graphical pieces scattered throughout the base. And there's just that little bit of an extra touch, which is just adds a lot more to it overall. If you go over to his hands, you can actually see like ridges, like on a human being, like the dermal ridges and stuff like that. And you can see that fluid between in the middle of his palm that seems to come out of like all the joints on his body, kind of like where his as he expands and grows, those are the parts that are pulling apart, and it's like this visco fluid that's coming out of it. You can just see how detailed his hand is, even down to the spikes coming off his hand or the bones coming out of it. His portrait is very well detailed too. They did a real good job on the portrait overall. And all the bony protrusions coming out of him are extremely well sculpted. I'm really happy with how that came out overall. Just the amount of detail on his skin, you can just tell that there's so much texture in it. Even down to his pants. Everything on that is very well sculpted, and there's a good detail and texture added to those too. You can see the texture and detail on his skin here is just, it's very, very well done. It has added a lot of detail overall that you wouldn't expect to see, but it is in here. Because as far as what I don't like, he was really hard to get on this base, and his boot does not sit flush on the base. And I tried messing with this a few times, but it's just so damn heavy. I don't want to keep taking him on and off this thing and risk something breaking or anything like that, because you can see how his toe doesn't exactly sit flush, but he's on there really well. I just expected him to sit there maybe a little bit better. And over here on his back foot, it's the same way too. I know he's leaning forward, so his heel is supposed to be off. And the back boot does fit better on the ground overall compared to the front one. But I just feel as though it could have sit flush a little bit more. He is pretty sturdy. You can move him a little bit, but for the most part, he's really not going to go anywhere, so it's not a huge concern. But if I had to say one thing about it, I would definitely say that I wish his fit onto the bottom of the base was just a little bit better. Even his backside has a lot of detail on it. This is a part of the statue that you will hardly ever see just because you're going to most likely display him facing forward. So this part you don't see as much, but they didn't skimp out any detail on the back at all. It's just as good as the front. And he does have a bit of a seam line around his waist where he connects together. They did try and cover it up with this material right here, but you can still see a seam line through there. But it's not too bad. You don't see it as much in the front as you do in the back part, but it is present a little bit. As far as the seam line on his neck, it's very well covered up. There is a little bit of one, but it's not too bad. His head sits flush pretty well. And if you're looking at it from straight on, you never notice it anyway. So it's really not too big of a concern. But anytime you have a switch out statue, you're going to have a seam line anyway. In the head, it's just unavoidable. But they did do a pretty good job of hiding that. As far as the chip goes, I think it came out really well. You can see that little imperfection, that little indentation right below his boot. And that's where the piece chipped off from. But the color match came out very well that I did on it. So I'm pretty happy with how that came out. And like I said in the video before this where I fixed it, that this is such a massive piece that you don't even notice it. And if I didn't point that out to someone, you would never even know that that part was missing. Because that's not what you're looking at. When you look at the statue, it's just so big that you don't notice anything else. You're not going to notice a little imperfection like that. I have a little bit better lighting now, so I want to go over just a little bit more of the detail before I do the final conclusion on it. You can see a seam line there that I mentioned before. It is visible on the front, but there's no way to make this thing without splitting him in half. He's just so big and so heavy. And just to give a size comparison of how, like the size of his hands, I mean his hands are as big as mine. That's just how unbelievably huge this guy is. You can see more of the detail in his forearms, the veins coming out and that visco fluid that's coming out from his joints, and just a lot of really nice detail. And there's just so many bony protrusions coming out of him. They did a really good job with all of that. Now down to the final question of, is it worth the price? It depends. I mean, if you're someone who was into the Superman Doomsday comics back in the early 90s like I was, and you followed that storyline for a long time, and then something like this comes along, I think it's totally worth it. I think the amount of effort that went into making this, the amount of detail, the size, I mean, I think it's worth the price of admission for it. It is a big investment, and you have to be very careful with it because it is polystone. You don't want to end up breaking anything on it. So, like when I'm moving around in this room, I have to keep in mind that his hands are coming off the base. His flag sticks out at the end of the base. Not just the base on the statue, but the stand that I have him on. And his hand comes out over the front of my stand too. You have to be careful not to bump into this thing, because if you break it, you're completely screwed. As far as the chip goes that I fixed on it, I got a hold of Sideshow and they can't offer a replacement because there isn't any more statues left. The wait list is completely full and there's no more replacement parts available. They did offer me a refund, not a refund, but a credit, which I did accept. And overall, it only cost me $8 in supplies, in brushes, and a little bit of paint to paint that part. And the fact that I got a few $100s back for credit was well worth it for me. So I was happy with Sideshow on that. It's the first time I've ever dealt with them before, but no complaints on my end at this point. So yeah, in conclusion, I think he's worth it. If you have this on order and you're waiting for it, or if you're hoping to get on the wait list if someone else jumps off it and you have the money to purchase him, I'd do it. I mean, I'm happy that I got him. it's like one of those one-time things where I knew that if I passed up the opportunity and I didn't get it, I would probably regret it for a long time. And the fact that you just can't get them anywhere now. Sideshow is pretty much sold out. The wait list is full. There might be a few people that drop off it, but that's not guaranteed. And I did actually find one on eBay yesterday when I was looking around. It was over $3,000, and it's crazy amount of money. I'll put a link to that eBay ad just if you want to take a look at it, or if you want to track it to see if it goes up or down in price. As far as this stand that I built, you'll notice that it does have a lot of space on the other side. And the reason for that is I have Prime 1 Cyborg Superman on order. I start paying on that in December, and I believe I get done paying that around 8 months from there. So I'm going to display those two side by side. And one of the cool things about this one is this is statue number 78 of 500. And in the comic book, Superman number 78 was the one where Cyborg Superman and Doomsday got into it. And so it was pretty neat that I have a number that's tied into what actually happened in the comic book. I was hoping to get number 75 because that was the death of Superman, but I missed it by a couple numbers. And so I'm hoping that maybe the Cyborg Superman will have a cool number to go with it as well, but I'll have to wait and see. It'll be until next late summer, early fall before I have that one in possession. But overall, awesome piece. It's as good as what everyone says. It's as big and heavy as what everyone has said. So if you have it on order, you're going to love it. If you're still looking to get it, hopefully you can. And it's a good buy if you get it. So with that, thank you for watching, and until next time.